Great. All right, we are going to dive in to our agenda. Let us know, Eddie, if you lose us at any point. Just
All
wave
right.
wave your
Yeah.
hands or something,
Thank you
right?
for accommodating as
No, it's okay. We want to
interesting.
make sure you can participate. Okay, we're going to move on to our board leadership vote. So board policy 1.20.010P provides that the board shall elect one of its members as board chair and one of its members as board vice chair at the first regular meetings in January and July. As it is our process for board members to be considered for a leadership position, board members and members elect must notify the current board manager chair in writing by June 1st if they'd like to declare their intent to run for a board leadership position in July. Vice Chair Hollins declared his interest in the position of board chair. Thank you. And both directors Green and Wong declared their interest in serving as board vice chair. At this point, Director Wong, I see your hand is up, and I will turn the floor over to you.
Hey, yeah, thanks for dealing with the issues there. I really apologize. It kind of bums me out. I have to do my first meeting virtually, all the way from Denver. Hi. Yeah, I just want to say that I want to withdraw my candidacy. I originally put in my name back a while ago before I think I heard that Director Green was put in his name as well. And since I heard Director Green had put in his name, I fully support him as vice chair. I think he'd do a great job. Doesn't mean I don't want to eventually someday be run for vice chair. I do, but I don't have to do it now. I feel like I have a lot of things. Actually, I prefer not to do it now, rather kind of learn the ropes first and then. But I think I originally put my name in because I was worried there might not, in case that we had no one else. But yeah, I would like to withdraw, and I put my support fully behind Director Green. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Director Wong. And thank you for stepping up in your first year to step into a leadership or express interest in a leadership position. So with that, do I have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 6730, the election of Director Hollins as board chair?
So moved.
Second?
Director DePass moves and Director Brim Edwards seconds the adoption of Resolution 6730. Is there any board discussion? Ms. Bradshaw, is there any public comment? The board will now vote on Resolution 6730, election of Director Hollins as board chairperson. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, please indicate by saying no. And are there any abstentions? And Representative McMahon?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Representative Silverstein. I messed it up the very first time. We don't even know who that person is. Student Representative Silverstein.
Thank you. Yes.
Resolution 6730 is approved by a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative Silverstein voting yes. Congratulations. Before we move on, would you like to say any words? Incoming Chair Hollins.
Sure. I have a speech here.
Yay.
I'm joking. No, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you, everyone.
You are a man of few words. We appreciate that. Do we have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 6731, election of Director Herman Green as Board Vice Chairperson?
So moved?
Second?
Director Brim Edwards moves and Director DePass seconds the adoption of Resolution 6731. Any board discussion?
You went so quickly through that last one. I actually wanted to say something for the first motion. But having served in that role, I know it's there's challenges you're not going to imagine, and know that the rest of us are here to support your leadership and your work. So thank you both for stepping up.
Ms. Bradshaw, is there any public comment?
No.
The board will now vote on Resolution 6731, the election of Director Herman Green as Board Vice Chairperson. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, please indicate by saying no. And are there any abstentions? And Student Representative Silverstein?
Yes.
Resolution 6731 is approved by a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative Silverstein voting yes. Director Green, would you like to say any words before we move on?
No, I'm good tonight. I told a few people that I would be short-winded on this evening, and so I'm going to try to stick to that, and I will make up the time in the next meetings.
We have reserved your time. Congratulations to incoming Chair Hollins and incoming Vice Chair Green. Our protocols state that the transition to a new board chair will begin at the board meeting following this one, so you have to deal with me for at least a few more minutes. And then we will turn it over the next meeting, and we all look forward to your leadership. All right, next up, we turn to public comment. And so I will review our guidelines for public comment. First, the board thanks you for taking the time to attend the meeting and provide your comments. Your input informs and improves our work, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts and reflections. The board office may follow up on any board-related issues raised during public testimony. We do request that complaints about individual employees be directed to the superintendent's office as a personnel matter. And if you have any additional materials or items you'd like to provide to the board or superintendent, we ask that you email them to publiccomment@pps.net, public comment, all one word, at pps.net. When you begin your comments, please clearly state your name and spell your last name, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak, and then there will be a sound after the 3 minutes, at which point we would appreciate it if you could conclude your comments. Ms. Bradshaw, I think we have a few people signed up for public comment.
Yes. Have Jorge Sanchez Bautista. Okay. Willow Washburn.
Come on down. Willa? Yeah. Oh, well, welcome. We're glad you're here. Go ahead and, you can take a seat at either one of those microphones.
Oh, thank you.
And again, you'll have 3 minutes and your time will start. You can go ahead and state your name, spell your last name, and your time will start when you start talking. And you'll see the little lights ahead of you. They'll come on when you start talking. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. Willow Washburn, Willow Washburn. It is essential that we have school bus monitors on every school bus for the safety of our children. I'm asking for funding for school bus monitors to protect our children and keep them safe. It is impossible to keep children safe if you do not have school bus monitors. Protecting the children while the bus driver is focusing on the bus is what we need to do to protect our children and keep them safe. The bus driver cannot protect the children. Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Coraline Thaleen. Elizabeth Nelson.
Hi, Ms. Nelson. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. My name is Elizabeth Nelson, Nelson. I'm here today to talk about Portland Virtual Scholars. This is a program that's run through PPS in all the high schools in the district to help students with credit recovery. It has allowed hundreds of students to graduate on time with their class over the 7 years of its existence. Both the superintendent as well as multiple board members have come to the annual student panel and heard the importance of this program to the district. Unfortunately, the district does not treat the employees of Virtual Scholars with the same respect. The reason I say this is because currently the starting salary for a Virtual Scholars mentor, which is the backbone of the program, is $19 an hour. At this rate, a mentor has to run a high school classroom with 25 students for 3 periods every day of the school year on their own. These are mentors are alone and in charge of all classroom management and other classroom related issues that come up during the period and the rest of the school day. Because of this low pay and workload, over the last 2 years, Virtual Scholars has lost half of its mentor staff every year. As one of the mentors said last year when quitting their job, despite calling it the best job they had ever had in their entire life, that if I stay here, I will end up sleeping in a cardboard box by the end of the school year. Despite my 10 years of service with the district, I have finally had enough as well, because on top of the pay, was at the top of the pay scale, making $22 an hour, and at the same time, the job I just started yesterday, I will be making $22 an hour for the state, and I'm at the bottom of the pay scale. I think the final straw for me was during contract negotiations with PFSP. The PPS negotiator said, we don't want to pay our employees poverty wages, but did not follow up with any real or substantial changes like offering a fair living wage. In fact, they offered the opposite and offered only a 2% raise for employees. You are losing some of your best, brightest, and most dedicated workers simply because they cannot take the low wages that you keep giving us. Every year during Classified Connections, we hear how important we are for the success of students, and yet every year you stop only at words and do not show us because we still have poverty wages, poor working conditions, and unsafe working environments. If you really want to have the best outcome for students, you need to invest in the people who work directly with them. The best symbol of this is this. This is what you give for employees who have worked 10 years. A lanyard that falls apart after a month of use instead of the pins you used to give us and celebrate us. But you don't seem to care because all we hear is words. Thank you.
Thank you.
Malik Elker.
Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Malik Elker, M-A-L-A-K-E-L-K-H-E-R. I started working with the district a month ago, and they sent me to Jackson Middle School. And I start having sexual harassment. Okay, and the person who did this to me, I asked my supervisor to talk to him, and he didn't do anything. I emailed the HR, and they didn't do anything. So I called Adam, and Adam sent Anthony to me. And Anthony, the first thing he did to me, he looked me from head to toes multiple times, and he told me like what to do in this situation. And I told him, this guy, he kept asking me to go out with him, and they said no. He's a pushy guy. He kept asking me to go out with him, and I said no, and he kept asking me, so what should I do now? He's like, no, you keep saying no. But this guy, Anthony, he's teaching me what to say. I told him, I said no. No, he told me, you gotta say no. And I told him that I said no. So Anthony, he didn't really he's not gonna help me. I told him, can you please move me to a different school because I think you're not gonna help me here. So he said, I'm not gonna send you to a different school because you didn't do anything wrong. He said, give me some time and I'll talk to you soon. And the next day, I talked to Roshani from HR. I'm having anxiety and I can't talk anymore. And today I came here to quit. Here's my card, my keys. And they sent me to a different school, and I'm having problem in another school, and they didn't do anything. HR not helping, supervisor not helping, manager is not helping. I'm here just to work, to make money. I'm not here to do anything else. I'm here to make money, and they're making that so fucking hard for me. I'm shaking right now. Thank you so much. Thank you for this experience.
Annika Pedersen. That's everybody signed up.
That's everybody, Kara?
Yep.
Okay. Thanks, Kara. Okay, next up on our agenda.
Chair, before you move on, with your permission, I don't want to be silent on that last comment. It is challenging to hear. I just want to make sure I'm absolutely clear, and I know that you would agree with me that we're vehemently opposed to sexual harassment in our workplace and in our schools. We absolutely don't tolerate retaliation for making a complaint of sexual harassment either. We have board policy on workplace harassment, an administrative directive to our supervisors and our administrators. We keep records of every Title IX sexual harassment complaint, and we take immediate steps to support any individual who makes a complaint. If any of our employees have concerns about sexual harassment, and this is for our audience or anybody listening, I want to make sure they understand that there's multiple paths to reporting and escalating these concerns at PPS. These include their supervisor, their supervisor's supervisor, union representatives, Title IX office, and human resources. We have a long-standing working relationship with SEIU on sexual harassment complaints made by and made against their members, and we will continue to engage with them on the issues that are raised tonight. Thank you.
I got a question.
I'd just like to have a follow-up after the meeting on the situation. That's possible. Thank you.
And I don't want it to seem as though, and I don't plan to talk, but I don't want it to seem as though as a district that we're trying to defend her reality. This is her experience. This is what happened. She just started. And although we may have policies in place, she hasn't been here long enough to understand those policies or to know who she could talk to. She did what she thought that she could do, and for whatever the reason, that is, again, unbeknownst to me at this point, she still has an experience as to where the woman just quit at the dais. And to me, I don't see why we're still here talking. Somebody should be out there talking with this young lady because we just lost a person of color. I don't. So, okay, because this is, okay, thank you. I just want to make it clear that as a district, we cannot defend, like, it happened. And whether or not it was intention or not, intention doesn't negate the impact, right? We say that all the time. And so her impact is real. And I'm thankful that Sharon went out. I didn't realize that that she had just went out, but I just want to make that clear. We can't.
Yeah, I just want to look at the fact that, we had an employee come here to the dais and quit. We might want to look at our policies and procedures moving forward, because to bring someone to come here to quit, we probably want to relook at that.
Well, I also in our last board meeting, we talked about accountability, and I appreciate what you said, that we do have the policies in place, but we have, if there's an accountability issue, we need to hold people up the chain accountable for their behavior, so.
Okay. Thanks for those comments. Make sure I'm on. Next up on our agenda is President Bonilla here from the Portland Association of Teachers? That's in my script, but I didn't think. Oh, did she ask? Okay, great. Is President Bonilla here? This may be left over from our last meeting, so I'm just checking to make sure. I'm not seeing Angela Bonilla, so I'm gonna. She did, okay, but I don't see her here, so we'll move on and see if she shows up. And next up, the Service Employees International Union has requested to speak tonight, and so thank you, Amy Silva, for being here, but you're not Amy Silva. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank
Welcome.
you. Hi, my name is Veronica Green, Green, and I'm wrong way.
It's almost related.
I know, right?
And I'm Gabe Pink, Penk.
You've all heard me talk before. I'm a PPS parent, and I'm also the lunch lady at Creative Science of Bridger. I recently met with one of our members, a custodian who shared with me her recent interactions with PPS HR regarding sexual harassment she has experienced at work. She has given me permission to share this information tonight. I will not be using her real name, though, and I will refer to her as Jane. And by the way, all of this is documented in emails, too. On April 3rd of this year, the principal at the school Jane worked at reached out via email to HR and shared a written statement from Jane. In the written statement, Jane disclosed that the other custodian at her school, was taking pictures of her without her knowledge or consent. The son's school manager and assistant manager saw him and told her. Sorry. Okay. Jane said that this custodian tells her about his personal, private, and intimate details of his relationship with his wife. He tells her what women he finds hot, that's quotes there, and what he would like to do with them. When women come through the school for various after-school activities, he will tell Jane about which body parts he likes on these women. If this isn't alarming enough, he has stated in front of Jane and other custodians, that when he works at high schools, there are some girls that he almost can't resist, and it is hard to control himself around these girls. When I say girls, I'm referring to our students. Jane has done everything she is supposed to, including telling this custodian that she does not like when he says inappropriate things to her or around her. She reached out to her principal, her supervisor, HR, and her supervisor did conduct an investigation. During this time, the custodian in question reached out to Jane over various social networking platforms. Jane took screenshots, sent them the communications to HR as she was instructed to do so. On April 17th, Jane reached out to HR to see if there was an update on the investigation. April 18th, HR replied and said the investigation was not complete and they would reach out to her as soon as it was completed. On May 10th, Jane emailed HR to let them know that the custodian was reaching out to her again via social media. HR said he would not be doing that he should not be doing that, and they would talk to him. They also stated that their investigation would be wrapped up by the end of the week, and they would verify this with Jane. On May 17th, Jane reached out again without receiving a response. On May 25th, Jane reached out to HR once again for the status of the investigation. HR replied that they completed their investigation and that the custodian's unprofessional conduct and workplace harassment were founded. They stated that they could not tell her what action was taken, but that her complaints were addressed and they would be sending her a formal response. She's never received the formal response. I understand that we're not able to be informed of the actions that were taken. What we do know is that the custodian was not fired, but moved to a different building, which is pretty much happens all the time. Anytime anything happens, someone's moved. Anyway, let me get back on track. All the while, he was telling everyone he got promoted. My union and I believe in progressive discipline, but I understand from what I heard from management and HR say in our last bargaining session last week that they have the right to skip over the steps of progressive discipline and terminate an employee if the circumstances bring them there. So they can do that. SEIU Local 140 leadership believes that this is one of those instances that should have gone to termination immediately. I was at the building that this custodian was moved to less than 2 weeks ago. This is a building that doesn't have children present on a regular basis, but that day there were tons of children, I don't know what kind of program, all over the place, and other women, other PPS employees that could fall prey to this man who was also investigated at his last job for sexual harassment. As a parent, a woman, and a PPS employee, I am disgusted. I have a 12-year-old daughter. Well, she's almost 12, and she's heading into middle school at Mount Tabor. The thought of having this man near any school, or her, or any student, any woman, any employee, just makes my blood boil. I don't even know what to say. I don't even know what to say. Why is this man allowed to work at a public school or anywhere near children? I do not care if this man wasn't actually physically touching anyone that we know of. He shouldn't be around children, period, no exceptions. I want to end with something Jane told me. She said when she was first hired, she was cornered by a custodial manager. He told her that she is young, and if anything was said or done from other custodians that make her uncomfortable, she needs to tell him so he can take care of it. This clearly says that management knows what's happening, and they're just willing to sweep it under the rug. And I mean, the manager went to her and said that. PPS needs to make sure that they're following their zero tolerance policy regarding sexual harassment or any type of harassment. We want better, more robust training in regards to sexual harassment. Every year, PPS employees, we have to do our online pepper trainings. Harassment, sexual, otherwise, are addressed in these pepper trainings, but they're not engaging, they're not thorough, they're not meaningful. It's the same ones every year, and it's the same questions at the end every year, and then you get your certificate. That I don't know what that actually even means. This isn't enough. PPS needs to be a safe place for all students, employees, women and men. The culture of sexual harassment in the custodial department of PPS needs to be addressed now. It's running rampant, and management, they're ignoring it. So, thank you.
Thank you, Veronica. I want to add,
I have a question. When you talked about progressive discipline, it doesn't even sound like that happened at all to him.
Well, I don't know what happened, but I would think that that's probably what happened because he wasn't fired, so I guess he's on his second chance or third, I don't know.
Okay.
But it's, you know.
Sounds like more than a.
Yeah, so I just
second
want to,
chance.
if the board would like to talk about specifics, we can go into executive session. But in a public session, the board shouldn't be commenting on specific instances. And I'm happy to take us to executive session if that's what we want to do right now. Thank you for being here to testify. I think there's a lot to follow up on, Superintendent. Again, my other board members can speak, but I know that I'd be really interested in hearing, and thank you for your words earlier about our policies and zero tolerance and intention. I'd be interested in hearing an update on some of these specifics and what's happening in these specific cases moving forward.
so I had some prepared remarks as well I'd like to
Please go
share. Again, my name is Gabe Pink. I'm a custodian as well. I'm a union steward with SEIU. Regarding the policy, I do want to emphasize that what the policy is, in case folks are not aware. So workplace harassment is unwelcome and offensive conduct that creates an intimidating, hostile, or abusive work environment. And when it is brought to their attention, administrators and supervisors must take affirmative steps to stop workplace harassment, including warning, discipline, and recommending possible dismissal of the offending staff. And we have not seen this response. Unfortunately, we just shared two very powerful statements, but these are just two of many. I know of at least 5 people who I've worked with as a steward and talked to who have faced sexual harassment at PPS, 2 of whom who have subsequently been fired for undisclosed reasons. They had made complaints to HR. So I want to be very clear, as you are aware, that HR and management is aware of what's going on and nothing is happening. And that is why we have to come here today to bring this to you, unfortunately. It shouldn't have to be this way. But that is why we are here, and that is why brave employees like Malik, who endured way more than she ever should have had to just have a job to provide for herself and her child, and were forced to quit. She's been out on forced to take sick leave the last 3 days because we haven't had a response from HR to protect her in her job. So she's forced to use PTO, which she doesn't have anymore as a new employee, to protect herself. That's unacceptable. So I just want to summarize what we've heard, and I expect there to be follow-up and continuing engagement. We sent an email to the board, which unfortunately, I don't know why it didn't make it to you all. We sent an email on last Monday. Just got an email response today from the board manager saying somehow that didn't make it to you. So that's unfortunate. I hope that you receive it soon. It details some of what we're bringing to you tonight. And I want to be clear in what our demands are going forward, because obviously this is stuff that has happened for far too long already, and this is stuff that needs immediate action on. So we will be right there to make sure that this takes effect. So our demands for the board and for the school district are to immediately investigate all complaints of sexual harassment. This is already the policy, but apparently it's not being followed. And to follow policy to ensure the victim is protected from further harm, including offering paid leave if necessary while the district conducts an investigation. The district must, 2, discipline those responsible, including managers who are complicit or engage in sexual harassment themselves. Again, this is just what the policy should be. 3rd, we are recommending that the board perhaps pursue an independent audit of PPS's compliance with the law in regard to sexual harassment. I think by now it should be clear that this is a step that should be taken. We don't know the full extent of what's going on. We're just scratching the surface. And finally, like Veronica shared, we are asking as employees for thorough in-person comprehensive training for all of us around sexual harassment issues. We are asking for that. We hope that the district will receive our request for that. We all need that, and that is one step to addressing this rampant abuse in the workplace. And I'll just end speaking not so much to the board and the district. We hope to see action. Unfortunately, as the superintendent shared and as the district shared in a statement earlier to the press, these are just words so far, and they have not followed through with action. Apparently, the district is deeply committed to fostering and maintaining a safe and respectful environment. That is called gaslighting. So I want to speak to our employees and fellow supporters, and I want to ask that, remind us that we can't always depend on PPS to do the right thing. If this is the case, we must support each other and fight for truly safe and dignified workplaces. This is our goal as a union. We will stand together and support each other. So I'm calling on people, if you have experienced harassment or if you are concerned about this issue, we hope you will reach out and get involved. Solidarity means we care about each other's well-being, and we fight to make sure no one has to endure this kind of violence and abuse, especially at work. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight.
And I just want to say thank you for having the courage to come out and to say something. It's never easy to stand up and say something out loud, especially like this. And this is the type of thing that people use silence. Silence becomes the power, where if you don't say anything about it, then it actually gets more power. And they make it seem like you should be afraid to talk about it. Nobody is going to believe you. Nobody is going to care. And that's just not true. And so I want to thank you for having the courage to come out and to say something, despite your belief that people may or may not care, or you're not seeing what you think you ought to be seeing. You did what you were supposed to do, which was to come out and say something. And now the onus becomes on this side of the table to take a more intentional look at that, and then for us to be able to do something to show you. I believe actions speak louder than words. To show you that it may not have looked this way before. You may not have gotten, the response that you thought you were getting before, but things are changing. And so I just want to. This is never easy, but I'm glad that you did. We got to uncover the ugly so that we can get to the good. So. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Green, or Vice Chair Green, for that comment. I just want to make sure it's noted that this administration takes this very seriously. Zero tolerance. We investigate every single claim of sexual harassment, and we will follow up accordingly to address. We will show you. Thank you.
I'm not super comfortable with this immediate transition to our next item, so I'm just going to take a 3-minute break, not long. Don't go anywhere. Get a glass of water. We'll be back at 5 till to continue the rest of our agenda. We'll note that it's not as establishing precedent. Okay, let's go ahead and bring it back together. All right, thank you for that short recess. Next up on our agenda is a resolution to establish board committees. And again, this is something that the board establishes board committees. And so this resolution establishes the board committees for the 2023-24 school year. Do I have a motion and a second to adopt Resolution 6732?
Motion.
Second.
Director Green moves, Director Brim Edwards seconds. Is there any board discussion about the resolution?
Just noting for the record that one is a task force and we don't need to, it's not a formality, we're just.
Great. So not establishing any precedent around task forces. It is included in the resolution.
That's my point, yes.
Don't need to do it in the
so
future.
The new leadership can just go crazy with task force
So many
without
task forces.
asking their
Task forces
teammates
everywhere.
Task.
Ms. Bradshaw, is there any public comment?
No.
Okay, the board will now vote on Resolution 6732 to establish board committees for the 2023-24 school year. All in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Student Representative Silverstein,
Yes.
are there any abstentions? Resolution 6732 is approved by a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative Silverstein voting yes. Next up, we will have a discussion about the 2023-24 school year budget following the June 23rd passing of a $10.2 billion state school fund by the Oregon legislature. If you may recall, the board approved and adopted a budget based on the initial forecast of $9.9 billion, because that's what we knew at the time. Tonight is intended to be a short discussion to get a sense of what the initial thinking is on how to allocate additional resources. Superintendent Guerrero, would you like to introduce this item? I think it's next. Yeah, it's next up. Yeah. Superintendent Guerrero.
Yes, Chair Scott, directors, we pledge to come back to you early regarding news that it appears, though hasn't been officially signed by our governor, that there would be new monies coming to public ed K-12. So we wanted to open up a conversation, but first give you a sense of about how much we're estimating we can expect. Share with you a few areas where it seems prudent to think about investing as a next priority. We want to have a discussion and get your thoughts on that. There's never any shortage of areas we can invest in, but we also want to balance our prioritized needs. So we have a few folks pinch hitting. As you know, our budget and finance team at the moment is non-existent, but we do have Juno here. We have Jonathan and Cheryl who are going to help provide some context. So this is just a first discussion, so just keep that in mind. So we're going to get into an update and what it means for us here at PPS.
Awesome. Thank you, Superintendent. So I'm actually going to have our budget manager here, Juno Chang, start us off, and then we'll take it from there.
Thank you. Good evening, directors. As you all know, the state legislature passed the $10.2 billion budget for the state school fund, an increase of $300 million from the $9.9 billion previous. We are calculating a $15.1 million increase for PPS's portion for fiscal year 24. This is an increase from the previous estimate of $11 million based on various factors, but the most prominent would be the ADMW. The latest statewide ADMW from the Oregon Department of Education shows a decrease from 676,919 to 672,145.
Excuse me. Can you explain what ADMW is? So
Yes,
people
that's
can
the
understand?
average daily membership, and the ADMW is the weighted version of that.
So that's, can we just say students for shorthand? I know it's more complicated than that, but just for the layperson, those
Yes.
are sort of a rough estimate of the students in the state. Okay, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And so there is a decrease of 4,774 students, or ADMW. Now, the district's ADMW has also decreased by 198 from the last estimate. However, the statewide ADMW has dropped significantly more proportionally. This decrease in the statewide ADMW, or number of students, means the funding per student increased from $9,722 to $10,031, or a $309 increase per ADMW or per student.
Next slide. So tonight, board, we have here a staff recommendation, some early thinking for discussion of how we could use and propose to invest a total of $18.6 million in new resources. This is, again, the $15.1 million increase from the state school fund and about $3.5 million in early literacy grant funding. We anticipate receiving about $7 million over the biennium for early literacy, and in addition to, as part of that that bill, we have to provide a 25% match, which is equivalent of 1.8 million over 2 years, or about 900,000. And so, as we are proposing and having a conversation here with the board about how we might invest these resources, we want you to consider 3 specific areas. The first one is to rebuild the fund balance. We are, given the fiscal cliff we will be facing with the sunsetting of federal funding, we are prioritizing or recommending that you prioritize your objective of maintaining between 5 to 10% in reserves. Again, the second area of focus is on early literacy and on Division 22, and we have here Dr. Proctor, who can speak more to the details there. As you all know, House Bill 3198, which is the Early Literacy Success Initiative, was adopted by the state legislature, which will add an additional $90 million in the fund for student success. And the fund will focus on increasing early literacy for children from birth through 3rd grade, reduce early literacy disparities, and increase literacy supports to educators, parents, and guardians. Although district allocations have not been formally been awarded yet, PPS, again, is anticipating receiving about $7 million in additional revenue over this 2 biennium. Additionally, we are recommending $1.25 million to bolster our ability to meet the PE requirements outlined in Division 22. Finally, the staff recommends focus on PPS employee wages. As you all know, PPS is actively bargaining with 3 labor groups: PAT, PFSP, SEIU, and soon DCU. And so staff is proposing using up to $5.2 million in new dollars to potentially support salary and wage increases with a focus on our lowest wage workers. And of course, if we want to discuss this one further, we can do that in bargaining executive session.
Chief Garcia, our slide, I think that we got, or that's in board book, and maybe I didn't hit reset, has $10.5 million in that early literacy and Division 22 support, and this has 5.65. So is this?
This is an accurate one. There was an update sent to you late this afternoon.
Great.
And the explanation is that the original slide had $7 million in 1 year, but it should have been split over 2 years over the biennium.
Thank you. So the 5.65 is the right number.
And that was my question too. When we added everything up, it does equal 22.1 million. But the details, okay. Well, there's a new slide somewhere.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, and so next slide. So we recognize this is an ever-changing landscape. As the superintendent mentioned, the governor has yet to sign many of these bills into law, so the final numbers are still pending. So for example, we also expect to see an uptick from the student investment account, but we don't have any of those numbers yet to be able to have a conversation with you. So today will be the first of 2 public conversations on the topic. The expectation or the hope is that on August 22nd, the board votes on the proposed budget amendments per our discussions here tonight. And with that, we will open it up for discussion.
I have a question. Earlier during the budget process, we had a series of recommendations from the Community Budget Review Committee. And there was some, because of when they came in, of like whether their recommendations going forward or for that particular cycle. And while they're designed to be for this cycle, not the go forward, I'm wondering whether there's been a consultation yet with the CBRC on the additional resources, just given that we didn't have a lengthy discussion on their pretty thorough set of recommendations during the budget process.
So the answer is no, we have not engaged with the Budget Review Committee as of these numbers are still in flux. If it is the will of the board, the collective board, for us to engage with the committee, then we're happy to do so.
And I would like to add that while we have not initially for this these budgeted dollars had that conversation, we did take notation of those recommendations that came from the CBRC, and we are willing to go back and go through those and make sure that we are capturing.
I just wanted to add that I've had email conversation with Mr. Kirshner, the chair of the CBRC, and he did confirm that those recommendations were intended to be folded in next cycle. So I did want to share that.
But the CBRC, it's like their process has always been for this budget cycle. So it's great if they're going to be considered for next cycle as well. But I would still hope that they would, I say that they're designed to be part of the current year budget cycle when they're reflecting on it. So I would hope that if we have additional resources that we'd go back and look at the recommendations they made for this budget and for next cycle as well.
Absolutely.
Sort of it's not a well-formulated question, but on the fund balance, recommending at least 6.4 million, which is a little less than 1%, and I see the table here, which is helpful. And again, so and actually, I do want to make sure that I'm reading the table. Those numbers are inclusive. So when we say adding 6.4 million, that gets us to a fund balance of $49.4 million. So again, we're currently 6.4 below that, and it gets us up to 8.5. This is the part that's not well formulated. We had some conversations during this budget cycle around fund balance, and I will just say it's very hard for me to vote for a fund balance that's at that very base minimum, the 5%. But in the end, given our resource situation, I was comfortable voting for that. I would love to see our fund balance, somewhere between 10 and 15%. But again, that's going to take some time to build back. So I like this recommendation, and I'm thinking about all the headlines just even yesterday and in the past about student achievement, and it's still really low. We still need very, sustained, much more sizable investment, over the next probably 5 years, right, to be recovering some of that. There's not an answer to this question. What's the right way to be thinking about these trade-offs? When we think about $6.4 million, which, again, the reason why we have a fund balance is in case things go wrong, in case something else pops up. And, we use that significantly during the pandemic, to support our schools and our students, as well as making sure it's cheaper to borrow. That's also $6.4 million that could go to additional learning supports. So I'll just put that question out there. Again, I know there's not an answer to it, but I'm just thinking, what's a good orientation and mindset as we sort of consider that trade-off?
I'll just start with maybe a data point, and then I'll turn it over to the superintendent. So to your point, I'm glad the chart was helpful. So with the increase of dollars, right, our fund balance percentage, it went down to 5.07. So we are right at that 5%. Threshold, which is the minimum that per board policy, and so I just want to point that out, that we are really at that bottom.
I'm recalling conversations we had 2 years ago, and again last year. We made a concerted decision we had resources, particularly with federal monies. We put this, for the most part, all into direct student services. It was the right call. We think that's one of the reasons why we didn't see the slippage that a lot of other districts, and certainly in the national studies that are coming out in the last couple days, you see that that's the case as well. So it's a good question, but the fund balance is there because we want to be monitoring it, and we would prefer it not to be minimal because we do have some cliffs coming our way. And so a lot of those learning supports, we're going to have a plan for sustaining the ones that we believe have been having an impact. So we're anticipating, having to look at our data this coming fall and making and really prioritizing which one of those made a difference for the kids, we're most concerned about. So, that's the tension. Should we save a little more, or should we spend it to give our kids who are furthest behind a continued opportunity to be closer to grade level? Of course, we have lots of other efforts and an array of supports and strategies in place right now that are attempting to do that. The second category aims to do some of that by leveraging a smaller percentage of matching funds. We can participate in this non-competitive grant program to pay attention to making sure kids are reading at grade level in the earliest grades and really target our underserved students. And then the reason we have the third bucket here is because I've heard this board talk about our shared interest in making sure we're an employer of choice, that our talented educators and support staff, that they're also experiencing competitive wages. So each area is an important one. We'll certainly take another look at the CBRC's recommendations. Staff in some cases we'll certainly consider those. In some cases, to be honest, maybe we had a different point of view, or maybe we agree on the area of need, and maybe we need to do a little. Again, this is a first cursory thinking here. What are some other tactics that we can employ to get at that area of need? So I could go down a long wish list of what that could look like. Do we improve caseloads for our school psychologists? Do we create a couple floaters in our SPED department when caseloads or IEP meetings start to become overdue, so we have some relief there? I mean, there's no shortage of ways that we could, a little here, a little there, a little there. All of it will help to create some level of relief, and more importantly, keep us on track with our obligations, certainly with the federal IDEA, or even what we've suggested here with Division 22. We have a corrective action plan for PE minutes. We know that there's the legislature has sort of eased up the middle school requirement, but we've made a commitment to making sure all of our students, as part of their daily experience, have access to physical education. This would help accelerate making sure more kids sooner meet those requirements that we're obligated to meet. So, we're trying to be pragmatic here. We're kind of just testing the temperature to see what the board's thinking is. But I think you're recognizing, there's not a right answer. Each of these could serve a good purpose.
And I'll go to my colleagues in a second. It's a little bit of a technical budget question, but I assume we would keep that when we say in our reserves, it would not be we would not put it in unappropriated fund balance, meaning that it would be available during the year if we needed to, right? There's a couple different ways we could treat that funds technically.
Correct. We would treat it as contingency,
Which
would allow the board a little bit of flexibility if in case of emergency. Correct.
Great. Thank you.
We could come back after the first quarter, once we see our data, and decide we're going to set aside a little bit until we see where the need is, and then have some strategies to implement there.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Open it up to the board conversation.
I have-
Director Sullivan.
Yes, so on the fund balance, you've got two choices there, right? So if you chose the 75%, you move the rest somewhere else, correct? Okay.
Correct, yeah. So if we were to select the so we're recommending on the estimate here is 6.4.
Okay.
And so at minimum, and so if the board decides to go higher, we would have to identify we would have to, this is a math problem that we're trying to address the $18.6 million.
Yes, and so if we decided to go with the 6.4, we could move the difference between 6.4 and 5.5 over to one of the other areas, right?
Usually 5.5.
The recommendation is the 6.4, and the other option is higher than the 6.4. So kind of, yes, what you're saying, but in the opposite way. We would have to deduct from one of the other areas if we decided to go higher.
Oh, you'd have to, okay.
The total pie is 18.6, so you
Okay.
can decide to divide it, split it, however you like. You could say you want to set aside 2% in the fund balance. It just means we would draw down the available resources in the other categories.
Okay. Thank you.
So a couple questions, and then some just things that I'm thinking about in terms of the resources. On the summer school funding this year, and I'll have the same question for the $8 million that went to grants as all the schools as part of some of the equalization. But for summer school, was that COVID dollars, or are those actually general fund dollars?
Those were ESSER dollars.
Those were ESSER dollars.
So we potentially could have a hole next year.
We will have a hole because
Okay.
we were burning our federal relief monies. As you know, the legislature did not act on supporting summer school this summer, so we're using our federal monies.
So we've got
So we won't have any
We'll have a
resources.
potential hole there. And then the monies that were, the $8 million that was spread across the schools for discretionary grants to equalize in some ways the private fundraising that happens, that was one-time money as well?
Yes.
And
Right. So again, if you recall, there's a few new things, new strategies we wanted to prototype, and if we see that that tactic for our schools paid dividends or had an impact, then we're going to want to figure out at what level could we sustain a continued fund like that, a school improvement grant fund, as well as summer school or anything else. And so this is why having a little bit of a fund balance gives us some flexibility to consider those options moving forward.
I had a question
So
about the evaluation of that 1.25 the 100 to 125, if that's being evaluated, will that be evaluated? You were talking about whether that makes an impact or not. So each school building that gets the funding, and what will we be evaluated on?
That's a great question. I think we have to go back and look at, and I know we've provided this information to the board around what those funds were spent on. In many cases, those funds were not spent on classroom-based positions, but for example, there are several schools that wanted to make whole their front office support and to support multilingual families and students, right? And so how do you evaluate the impact of that when that might not have a direct impact on academics? And so it's a question we'll have to examine very carefully and look at, and in the places where they did offer some more classroom-based support, to see what those outcomes are and will look like. But it wouldn't be
I guess I was wondering about the criteria. So because each building is so unique and has unique needs, it would be hard to standardize the criteria across every building. But at some point, could we coalesce around the strategies that worked and did show results?
Sure, and that would be work that my team would do in conjunction with Dr. Franco's team around, because schools were asked to make sure that their investment was aligned with their school improvement plan. And that cycle of continuous improvement is how they're looking at whether that investment paid off or not, or had a return that would be acceptable or not, and not necessarily, you're correct to say that it wouldn't be appropriate for me and my team to blanketly evaluate those resource allocations in a universal one-size-fits-all format.
It is a great question. It's a good question to look at from an academic standpoint if it was a tutor. But maybe it was a non-academic investment, or to the example Dr. Adams gave, maybe the survey results from our families in the spring report a greater sense of belonging because now there was someone in the front office who spoke their native language. So, we'll have to look at it, slice and dice it a few different ways. And then it's also a combination of other strategies in place in our schools as well. We also have our learning acceleration specialists and other strategies that we're employing as well.
Director Edwards, I think you had some additional questions.
Yeah, so I want to keep track of those two big items because they seem like the summer school acceleration has been beneficial, and I'm not sure we should be letting off the gas yet. And if we don't have funds to backfill that, just a thought in my mind is prioritizing that.
I'm glad you pointed that out, Director Brim Edwards, because even though the legislature didn't act on summer school program funds, we are expecting at least a little bit of an uptick in SIA monies. So maybe that might be an opportunity to continue to target students who really need that extended fifth quarter next summer.
Great. And I guess I would just point out about the foundation, the funds that rounded out, or balanced out for schools that don't have private fundraising. I will say this budget process, we heard less from schools that those schools that didn't have the capacity to raise money, and yet also, even though they had students who had been historically underserved, they still didn't get title money or something else. They're kind of in that middle that I think schools had some flexibility, which allowed them to, just like schools that get privately raised funds, can focus on things that are important to their school communities, whether it's the front office or other places. So I'm going to be interested in that. And again, that may be a next budget cycle, but if we're talking about what we're going to be missing next year. And I have just like 3 or 4 smaller items that I guess I want to just put into play and sort of the mix, get staff's reaction to. The 2 years ago, the board created the Equitable Field Trips and Travel Fund, and it was funded this year's budget at $300,000, which is less than the first year, which was $500,000. So I potentially interested in a larger increment. And the other thing is that the funds just went to high schools. But we know that when we're approving school trips for middle school students to go for several weeks overseas, that there's a big gap at the middle school level. And I know part of middle school redesign, there's looking at how can we provide more equitable experiences or other experiences for our students in middle grades. So I'm interested in if that can be expanded to include some middle school experiences. And again, I don't think that's a big, but most of these things aren't big budget numbers. The other thing is I'm interested in, and Superintendent, we talked about this earlier, some sort of enrollment planning because we've, as other districts have, also lost students. What can we do to be really intentional about reaching out to students if our capture rate's gone down, or what are we doing to actively bring back public school students, which again, I don't think it is a huge budget number, but may take some resources. And I'm just going to channel Bryony, the school psychologist, so I'd be interested from staff's perspective about whether we have really the right coverage we need. I know last time it was just a matter of resources, so what we think about that. And again, I don't need an answer now, but just I want to put some things out there. And I say the CBRC, and I need to go back through them about ones, but I just think out of respect for the work they did that I'd want to relook at it with if we have additional resources. So.
Absolutely. Appreciate those 3 areas. I was thinking of Bryony and thinking about and spoke with Chief Buno about, a couple school psych floaters. And we are prototyping some school marketing that we can sort of fill in the board with more to make sure we're attracting enrollment and supporting some of our schools as well. So and if you already are thinking ahead on the middle school redesign and capstone. Those funds really helped out all of our high schools with making experiences possible. But again, SIA hopefully will be another opportunity to take that concept to the middle grades as well.
Thank you. Additional board comments, questions?
I'm sorry, I'm off the tab here, but I'm happy to see that we're looking at wages, because I think everybody's struggling with staffing, and so I'm happy to see that a portion of that 18 million is focusing on the district's lowest wage workers, which we know that cost of living in Portland is very high, housing, so.
Thank you. Director Hollins?
Yeah, I just had a question around the Oregon Department of Ed grant. Is that 3.5 that's available, is that the max, or is that just what we're estimating on using?
That is the allocation that we would be provided from the state.
Okay. And so, I'm gonna be with Director Scott on the fund balance piece. The fact that we can't have it in there to use, I don't know, for other things that comes up that we see that are working. I would like to at least at the 8.5, I like that number, just because we can still have access to that later on for programming as that happens. Also, I would like, we keep talking about this cliff, and I know it is. What is that cliff look like exactly? What are the funds is it just those ESSER funds? Is that we're talking about the cliff, or are there the totality of how much we're looking to not have next year versus this year? Do we have that number, or can we get that number as well?
Yeah, we can get that number. I would say the cliff is both as a result of the ESSER, the federal dollars coming to an end, sunsetting. And I would say then the increase, the differences between the cost of doing business versus the revenue we receive is continuing to be unbalanced. And so I think that's kind of creating the second part of that cliff. So it's both and.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. Any additional? Yes.
I just want to reemphasize Director Brim-Edwards and Director DePass's comments about staffing, school psychologists, and wages, because I think that funding those positions should be one of our main focuses.
Great. Thank you.
Director Hollins, we do have an answer for you. It is $36 million of ESSER, so that is what our cliff is looking like as a deficit between next year and the year after. No, this is a $36 million difference between this year and next year. Correct.
There's a question. It'll come back around to the topic. But our open positions at the beginning of the year, so I assume most of the positions in last year's budget get budgeted for a full year, or do you do we estimate we're going to have a Q2 hire or Q1, or are they mostly like a full year?
So for budgeting purposes, we do count the FTE or the employees for the full fiscal year.
For the full year. And then this is a question maybe just for the future, unless Chief Reese knows right offhand, like how many open positions we have. I'm curious about, I know last year we had a significant underspend some point in time just because of when people got hired in the year. And I'm thinking about those one-time funds being added to our fund balance or the reserves. Just, I'm curious what that.
You're talking about augmenting our fund balance with salary savings during.
Yeah, and I'm not talking in replacement. I'm curious also about that as a potential filler of the reserve.
I can share with you the number of school-based vacancies for next year. As of yesterday, there are 221 positions. So that's not FTE, that's positions.
Great. Thank you.
Oh,
great. Director Wong.
Hey, yeah. Sorry, I've been watching virtual live streams of the board meetings for over a year and keep forgetting that I can talk.
Yeah.
It looks the same on this end to me. Yeah, I really like majority of what I see here. I think that makes a lot of sense. I do want to reiterate what a few of you have already said before, that it would be nice to follow up with the CBRC and hear what they have to say as well. It'd just be good to, in case there's any holes that we missed or whatnot. And also, would that be something that we could see before? I mean, I assume we would see that before the next meeting, and it depends. But I'm just curious about, guess not really sort of a question, but what kind of, do we have a plan in place can we have a plan in place to reach out to them and have them review and be able to see that review?
Yes, so tomorrow morning, first thing, I will be convening our budget team to review and work on a plan to get in front of the CBRC.
All right, thank you. And then the last comment is that I also think that school psychologists and stuff is huge, because I mean they play a huge role, and they cover they just mean a lot to a lot of students, and I think they're kind of a effective multiplier in my mind. But yeah, thank you.
Great.
It would also just really quickly, never mind. I need to formulate my question before I ask. Thank you.
Great, and I would just remind the board, we can also submit written questions into staff, and they would become part of the Q&A for the next conversation. Any final comments from the board? I'll end this. And I'm not sure if any media is reporting on this or not. This feels like good news because we're adding some money to some much needed programs, but I don't want anyone to forget the larger context. The state budget was $10.2 billion. That is a cut from current service levels. So again, we had to pass an even more reduced budget. So this feels like a win, but it's just good to keep it in context that it's not. And the reason why it's not is because our governor and our legislature did not prioritize public education as part of this year's budget process. Full stop.
So as a next step, and just want to make sure for staff to prepare for the next conversation on August 8th, we will continue to refine these numbers as we get more information coming in from the state. So we will update those numbers with you, including hopefully the dollars from the student investment account. The second thing is what we heard tonight, at least, is to have staff look at possibilities around school psychologists, looking at the field trip equity funding, and then as the superintendent shared, we do have some work in play around enrollment planning, but we'll provide more information so the board is aware of how we're thinking about that. I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything else in terms of what we should be thinking about.
Yeah, I just have a question. You talked about unfilled positions, correct? So is that across the board? Is that teachers, aides? And so we do want
That was school-based staff.
school-based staff?
Correct.
Okay, so we're looking hard, I guess.
We're working really hard.
Okay. Thank you.
So the number the chief Reese gave was school-based staff, not staff. Actually, and you don't have to answer now. I was looking for the overall number, just because I'm thinking if some of those don't get, if they're budgeted for full year positions, but they're not actually hired till later in the year, there's some one-time savings. Yeah. I don't need to know now, but it'd be great to know later if you can. Thanks.
And I just want to be specific about the travel part. That's a twofold. That she's looking what I heard, because I'm
Beyond high school.
I'm into it.
Because it channels me.
Is both the middle school as well as the high school, but also the number went down. So is there a possibility for that number to come back up? And since we're going to be since we're possibly looking at going further, meaning that we're going into the middle schools, then it may need to go higher than the 500 that we did just with high school. But if we're going to be inclusive of middle school, then we may need to find out what are the trade-offs. And I want to be very clear that I know what I'm asking for. It may not seem like a lot, but you eat an elephant a bite at a time. And eventually, if we keep taking bites, then there's nothing left. So what does it look like, though? What am I going to lose? What am I sacrificing to get this higher number of, let's say, I'm just throwing it out there. How do we get $1 million? Give 500 to the middle schools and 500 to the high schools, so that we can not lose but go up. I feel like $1 million is easy. So let's get it.
So thank you, Director Green. We've certainly heard this. I don't think we even utilized the full amount last year. We're going to put our Assistant Soup, Calvert, and a whole team around this. We know our high schools, we're able to really have a lot of experiences. So, we'll have to sort of pencil it out to see how much it will take to make sure our middle schools, can incorporate some funding for capstone and field trips as well. I don't want to lose the underlying big point that Director Hollins made. There's going to be a $36 million gap going into next year. The fact that we have this level of fund balance is partly due, not to pat myself on the back or the team here, is we took some evasive action mid-year to kind of constrain activity, and so we have the number that we have now, but it'll be prudent to pump some money into that fund balance so that next spring we're not talking about all the reductions to the same degree.
Right. Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much. Appreciate the briefing. Next up on our agenda is a local option overview and proposed timeline. Director Brim Edwards is chair of last year's local option renewal committee. Would you like to introduce this topic?
Oops, thank you. So for the past year, the Local Option Levy Committee has been meeting to plan for the renewal of our local option, which provides critical operational financial support to schools across the district. Specifically, the levy provides funding for approximately 800 teaching positions a year. Members of the committee, just for the record, have been Director Hollins, Scott Green, and myself. The committee considers, I'm just going to provide an overview of what we just, the high level we discussed and the recommendation that is coming to the board. So the committee considered a variety of potential election dates to refer this to voters, including this November's election and the May and November 2024 election. And the committee is recommended referring to the board a local option renewal levy for the November 2023 election. Consideration of the voters of a levy renewal at the November election versus a later election will provide important information about available resources and some certainty, hopefully, in our long-term budget planning versus having to create different budgetary planning scenarios if we actually go later. So tonight we're bringing to the board the draft documents for referral. In the board materials of the draft resolution, we would consider at the next board meeting, that we would consider and vote on at the next board meeting. Also included in the board materials are the ballot caption, question, summary, and explanatory statement. And all these are documents which are part of the referral of the measure to the voters. The local option committee also considered whether it should be a renewal or proposed increase, and we'd had some conversations as a full board about that. And we also had multiple discussions about what the funds would be used for. The committee is recommending that we ask the voters to approve a 5-year local option renewal levy that will be a continuation of the $1.99 per $1,000 of assessed value. This means the tax rate remains the same and the rate would not increase. The levy revenue would be used for teaching positions, classroom, and other school supports. They'll also, as we have in past local option levies, had a community budget review committee that will provide independent oversight so the funds are spent as voters intended, and the CBRC will publish an annual report. In addition, the referral would specify that no levy funds will be spent on administration and that performance auditing of school district programs also will be done. In order to place the levy on the November ballot, the board needs to file a notice of election no later than Friday, August 18th, with the deadline of actually filing, so we could actually file it on September 7th. To meet the August 18th deadline, are you paying attention to these dates? The board will need to consider and vote on the measure at its August 8th board meeting. So, in addition, as part of the process for filing to renew the district's local option, the Board of Education is required to give notice to the Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission, also known as TSCC. And we need to notify them that we're planning to file a levy and explain the reasons for the levy. The TSCC is a legislative created advisory body that oversees budgets, taxes, debt, and management practices of the Montgomery County taxing districts. The notice to TSCC must be given 30 days prior to the filing date for the election, so no later than July 19th, 2023. After receiving the notice, the TSCC will notice and conduct a public hearing to discuss the proposed levy and will accept public comment at that meeting. So the purpose of tonight's agenda is to share the draft language with the board and broader community prior to our planned consideration and vote on the local option renewal levy. And that's going to happen at the August 8th board meeting. And the second purpose of this agenda item is to share the potential referral with the full board and community prior to our notice and holding of the meeting about the levy with the Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission. The language in the resolution and other materials has been updated from previous levies and is not significantly different from previous local option levy referrals that have been referred to voters in the past and been overwhelmingly approved. And in essence, the thrust of this local option is to continue to be a critical part of our annual operating budget, which is different from our capital budget. It's also important to note there'll be one final round of editing to make sure we are within the prescribed word counts and to finalize the exact language at a couple points in the living materials. There's very specific numbers of words that we can include in our referral, and we'll make sure that we get our message across within the required word numbers, but there may be some minor adjustments. We'll also send the final proposed materials to the board in advance of the August 8th meeting, so that you can all review and ask specific questions or raise concerns prior to that meeting, because that will be the meeting in which we are required to refer if we want it to be on the November ballot. So with that, I would just say that's the background and the recommendation from the committee, and it's setting us up for a vote at the August 8th meeting, which will be our one and only chance if we're going to refer before the August 18th deadline, and in order to meet the November election, which is the recommendation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
I have
Director
just a quick question for you, Director Brum-Edwards, and that's about board expectations around helping to pass the levy. I don't know if you have any words to share about that.
So certainly the board has an important role to play in the referral, but once it's referred, the board has a very important role to play, because staff, at a certain point, the staff can provide factual information about the referral, but board members and other community leaders are the ones that are going to need to lead the campaign, raise the funds, and actively advocate it for it, which is this different role. Again, staff can provide factual information but not advocate for it. So the board will have a very important role to play, and I've always played in all the renewals. Like I say, I think we're well positioned heading into this. Our community understands how important the teaching positions and the other positions that this funds, and the role that the local option plays in the ballot.
Great, thank you. So to summarize, we are planning to refer this levy to the ballot in November at the current existing rates, to fund 800 teachers, which are essential to the Portland Public School System.
Correct.
Great. Any questions for Director Brum-Edwards? Okay. Next up, and I think our final item for tonight, we will vote on the consent agenda. Board members, if there are any items you'd like to pull for discussion, we will set those aside for the next time we meet. But first, Ms. Bradshaw, are there any changes to the consent agenda? No. And board members, are there any items you would like to pull from the consent agenda? Director Wong. And we will have time to discuss as well, but Director Wong, go ahead.
Actually, yeah, I was actually want to discuss. I actually have decided not to move to pull anything, but let me know if it's a good time to discuss.
Great. If you're not going to pull, let me get the motion on the table, and then we'll open it up for board discussion. I'll come right back to you. So, did you want to pull anything, Director Hollins?
I want to pull the PAE Consulting Corp contract.
Okay. Are we clear which one that is?
That is PAE Consulting Corp. Developing a decarbonization roadmap.
Your mic's not on.
Oh. Developing a decarbonization roadmap to help district prioritize emission reduction measures needed to reach 2030, I don't see a number, 2040 and 2050 goals.
I'm just not seeing it in our list. That's why I just want to make sure we're clear with staff. Do you know which one we're talking about? Great. Okay, so we will pull that, and it will come back on the August 8th meeting. Okay, do I have a motion and a second to adopt the consent agenda?
Motion.
Second.
Director Green moves, Director Hollins seconds the adoption of the consent agenda, and now we'll turn to board discussion. Director Wong.
Yeah, I guess I decided not to move to pull. The one I'm talking about is the Smucker's Food Service one, and part of the reason I decided not to pull is because I didn't want to pull the rug under people and cause trouble. But I do have a big ask. One of this, in case you're not familiar, is the one that is to provide district, it says right here, the brief, the USDA commodity processed peanuts into ready-to-serve products. I guess one of the issues I have with this one is a safety issue. I personally have seen, both in my time working in and also out of school, having seen students have to go to the emergency room because of peanut exposure. And if you're not familiar, there's food allergies is a growing problem. It's sadly growing, and especially peanut allergy, and all of them come with different risks, but especially peanut. There's some that are way more than others, and peanuts come with a risk of anaphylactic shock. That can range anywhere from like hives all over the body to, a kid's throat seizing up and they're not able to breathe anymore. So I asked some questions with some people in the district, with our director of nutritional services, and just kind of get some information. I kind of want to share some ideas, and also kind of an ask. I guess my big issue is that, I'm not in any desire to want to regulate or put in policies like regulate what parents send their kids to school with. But I do think that as a district, we can work to make it safer for a lot of our kids, especially the ones that typically feel excluded because of food allergies. Just even if it's just a little thing, a little bit safer is a win, I think. In talks with people in district, it sounds like there's potential for change in terms of like I wouldn't want to change unless it was like a win-win-win situation, right? Like where it's just we can change smartly, but also perhaps even find a local option and even healthier options too, because this is processed food, which even though a lot of kids depend on it, it would be nice to find healthier options. So I guess my ask is for Superintendent Guerrero, if you'd be willing to, I would love to talk to you or ask if you would be interested in considering potentially other options, because I know what this contract is, it says with the option for renew, every year. I would personally love it to see if we can find an alternative or a different option before we renew for next year, or in place of renewing for next year. So I guess that's my ask is if you'd be willing to explore some potential replacements or options, or even other products that they can provide. And the other thing also, the reason, another benefit that could possibly be is, as I was kind of asking around, it seems like there's a lot of burden on cafeteria staff having to separate foods with allergies, especially peanut products, and having to have separate dishwashers or separate processes or disposable dishes and stuff like that. If this could even mean like less of a burden on them, I think that would be, if we could slowly start eliminating, I would like to slowly eliminate some of the more dangerous allergens, because in my mind it's a safety issue. But yeah, that's my rant, and I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that. Thank you.
Just to respond to Director Wong, of course, always open to having a conversation about our food allergy administrative directive. It might be a good time to query our families, because food allergies are becoming rather prevalent. If it's time to take another look at, and is there an alternative? And I'd certainly want to include our nutrition services and our health services staff as well in those conversations. So, this doesn't have to be a forever thing.
Thank you.
I just also really want to appreciate you for bringing that up, because I've seen kids that have experienced that particular food allergy, and I know that they're growing. They're more prevalent. I'm just wondering if we could, Smucker's a huge corporation, if we could work with them to either remove peanuts from the food product or process them in a peanut-free facility, which they do have now.
Director Sullivan.
Thank you.
Yes, it seemed like a lot of the construction contracts had students working with the people. And I just wondered if we have any way that we're looking at how that works, and how many students work with the contractors, and what happens to them after that.
COO Young?
Good evening. Yeah, it's a good question. And so in our contracts, all of our construction contracts over a certain dollar threshold, we have incentives in there for them to work with students. And also they sign up with these different programs, I'm going to forget the name off the top of my head, that allows our schools, our high schools in particular, to be able to access them for different activities. And we do track those as we go through the course of the project. So our construction contracts. Also, often it is our design teams, our architects and engineers that engage with the students as well.
Great. Before we move to a vote, Director Hollins, do you want to ask any questions or give any direction to staff on the contract that was pulled before it comes back in August?
No, I'll send my questions in.
You'll send your questions in?
Yes.
Okay, great. And we put this on the table, right? We did a motion in a second. Great. So the board will now vote on resolutions.
Wait, I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Just about like the Smucker's contract, like for alternatives, isn't like Smucker's like always the Uncrustables? So like, do they have alternatives that don't have peanut butter? Because I thought it was the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
It may.
Yeah, from
Do it, you
from
do
my inquiry into when I was asking about it, it is like those prepackaged peanut butter jelly sandwiches.
That is correct. So this contract is for their prepackaged peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So they're made off-site. They come in their own individual packages. And that is the only peanut butter option that is on the menu. We're currently providing them for summer programs. We also provide them during the school year as well.
Great. Thank you. All right, so the board will now vote on resolution 6733 through 6738, minus the contract that was pulled. All of those in favor, please indicate by saying yes.
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 All opposed, please indicate by saying no. Student Representative Silverstein?
Yes.
Any abstentions? The consent agenda is approved by a vote of 7-0 with Student Representative Silverstein voting yes. This meeting is adjourned, and our next well, let me ask, is there any final business before I adjourn? Sorry about that.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't.
Yeah.
I'm glad you didn't cut me off.
It's just-
I just wanted to thank you for chairing the board for the last year. I know it's a huge responsibility. It takes a lot of time, and the beneficiaries are always the rest of the board. So thank you for your service as chair, and thank you for not gaveling me down before I had a chance to say that. So thank you,
Great,
Andrew.
thank you. Thanks. No, it's been an honor, and it is a challenge, but a very interesting one, and I've learned a ton, and hopefully moved some of the things in the district forward. So, any other comments before we adjourn? Any other board business?
Great work, we got.
Awesome job, sir.
It's
Thank
been
you.
great working with you as a leader.
Great, and I'm still going to be here next meeting.
You're not going anywhere.
I'm not going anywhere.
Way to get us out on time.
Our next regular meeting will be held August 8th, 2023. We are at